Welcome on the Dharma journey, Nikki. So glad to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and it's so nice to see you again.
Yes. So Nikki and I, we've known kind of each other for a long time. We used to live in Australia together, and I just remember actually going into her cafe that she owned and seeing her in her in her element, and I really was inspired by that, like that passion that you had for food and for wellness. And it was definitely, I wasn't on my journey at that point, but it definitely inspired me. And then obviously now you're obviously mental health counselor, clinical nutritionist, and you're doing a lot of incredible things with women. And we're going to dive straight into that now. And yeah, it's something that's I'm really passionate about, and I really love to invite women on that are role models. So thank you for being a role model and inspiring me.
Oh, that's so kind, Raya. Thank you. That's so kind of you. And yes, I remember meeting you so many years ago now. And when I did have the health food cafe, and that was something I obviously had as a nutritionist. I worked as a nutritionist and had the cafe and the catering business, and I was running a million things at once. And it was a very crazy time of my life.
Yeah, and I remember you had like this specific thing that I ate, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was so yummy. And I used to go and get the same thing all the time. Like I loved it. But yeah, no, I really love what you're doing with women, and obviously, your background. You might have to tell the listeners because you have like 11 years, I think, experience in this industry. So you've been around the block, and
Yeah,
you've done a lot of
I've been around.
yeah, you've been around, you've done a lot of different things, and they've kind of all led to the place that you're at now. And maybe you can just share a little bit about kind of your journey through like the different stages of your dharma, your purpose, and how that's kind of evolved since the beginning. And we're definitely going to get on
Sure.
topics like self-worth and addiction and eating disorders, and something that you're really passionate about, helping women overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll try and keep it as short as I can because it is a long journey and I don't want to bore anybody. But I mean, my journey started off many years ago. And when I graduated high school a long time ago now, I actually started doing my bachelor. I completed my bachelor in human resource management and human behavior. So that was like where I started at, 17. That's where I delved into. And it's interesting now to see the full circle because I did that and worked within that industry for 4 years. And then I got out of corporate, and I'll explain my journey after corporate. But it's funny that now, being a mental health therapist, how it's linked back to the initial interest I had at 17 of human behavior. It's just that it's in a different concept, a different context. So that's quite funny. I always kind of have a little chuckle about that. So I worked in corporate for a while, and the corporate life wasn't really for me. I was living that very corporate lifestyle where it was my 9 to 5, and I was eating shit food. I was partying a lot. I was making a great income. I was just kind of burning the candle at both ends, and, binge eating on the weekends, taking drugs, partying, whatever, working really hard during the week, making all this money, blowing it. It was just, I wasn't in a great place myself. I wasn't feeling the best, but I kind of pursued with this lifestyle, and I got to the point in my early 20s where I was like, what am I doing? Like, this isn't what I want to do. I don't like this lifestyle. There's got to be something else for me, but I don't know what it is. My passion, as you know, and you shared at the start, has always been food. I grew up in a very multicultural household. So my dad is Indonesian, Arabic, and my mother is Italian. So as you can imagine, the food that we get and grew up with is phenomenal. And we were taught to cook from a very early age. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a break. I went to India with my mom. Very stereotypical, go to India to find yourself. Went to India with my mom for a few weeks. Came back, and a girlfriend of mine was working in a restaurant. And she said, hey, Nikki, do you want to come and just like do some work in this restaurant whilst you're figuring out what you want to do, and just see how you go, because I thought I wanted to do something with food. So I started working in this restaurant, and within 6 weeks the head chef walked out. So he left, and we had to like pick up where he left off, and the boss was just like, Nikki, can you step in and chef? And I was like, oh my God, I can't chef. So I did it, and I jumped in, and I then became the chef of this restaurant. And during that time, my interest in food and in health grew. So I was really curious about, like, I love comfort food. I was still living a pretty unhealthy lifestyle, but I was starting to think, like, hang on, how do I make comfort food healthy? Like, how do I do this? And so then I embarked, while I was working as a chef, in my second bachelor, which was a Bachelor of Health Science, as a clinical nutritionist. So that was another 4 years. And in the entire time of that, I worked as a chef while I was studying, and I was kind of building up my ideas and what I wanted to do. When I graduated, I worked as a clinical nutritionist and started Nude, which was where you would have found me. So I started this health food cafe, which was a catering business, a health food cafe, one of the first, of its kind in Perth at the time. And I did that for the next 6 or 7 years, long time. When I was working in private practice, one of the things that I found more and more and more was that the clients that were coming to see me for nutrition and meal planning and weight loss and things like this, they weren't actually presenting with those things. And they actually were, many of them, suffering with either disordered eating or an eating disorder. And a lot of their health issues had nothing to do with the food that they were eating, but to do with the anxiety and the stress that was in their bodies. And it was causing the symptoms that they were experiencing. So the more I kind of worked with these people, I was like, hang on, you don't need a meal plan. You need like emotional support. You need to understand why you are behaving and living in such a way that you're treating yourself like this. Like, we need to get to the root cause of that. Yeah. So I kind of felt at this point like, oh, I can help them, but only to a certain extent. You can already probably tell that one of my limiting beliefs is that I'm not clever enough. So hence all of my studies and my desire to overachieve all the time. And that's something I've had to work through myself. Yeah, it's it's been a blessing and a curse. So I felt, I could help them to an extent, and slightly incapable of kind of helping them any further. Or I felt like, I'm not qualified to help you within this emotional mental state, and I don't want to go there because I don't know what I'm doing, really. So I then went and I actually did my yoga teacher training, which was for myself, but as well as a practice to integrate into my therapy and my practice with my clients. And then I went to do my postgrad in counseling psychology. So that was the mental health element, and that's the area that I now focus on the most. So that degree really gave me, or it was a postgrad diploma on top of my health science diploma. So that gave me the tools to be able to take my clients through like a very cognitive behavioral therapy type pathway, in order to help them understand things that were sitting beneath the surface, like their own limiting beliefs, their level of self-worth, how their childhood impacted the way that they're now acting, and all of these things which you don't learn when you're studying nutrition. You learn clinical practice, but you don't learn those types of skills. So now I'm here. I moved home to Bali. So I sold my business, moved home to Bali about 2.5, nearly 3 years ago. And I was lucky enough to land a job in a drug and alcohol rehabilitation clinic here when I first moved back. And I worked there for a while, for probably a year or so before the pandemic hit. And at the same time, I started up my own practice, which is online. And now I work specifically with women, and I work with women who suffer with anxiety, stress, low self-worth, addiction, or eating disorders. And it's a very mixed modality approach. So I really do integrate lifestyle, psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, compassion focused therapy, as well as pranayama and movement to help them through what they're going through. Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell.
Such a powerhouse. Like I was kind of like relieved when I heard that you're a little bit older than me. I was like, I think I've got some time left. I feel like I checked your website ages ago when I was like kind of beginning my business. I saw all of this, like you've done like so much different things, and I was like, oh my god, she's like powerhouse. And yeah, I totally relate to the feeling of not feeling good enough. It's something that I'm working on all the time.
Yeah, God, imposter syndrome is like a real thing.
Yeah, in the health industry, because you and especially as a mentor and a coach and like similar to you, like it's almost like our ego or that kind of inner child like wants to be put on the pedestal, sometimes is kind of puts itself on the pedestal. And then obviously, we feel kind of, yeah, that imposter syndrome if we're not fully being our authentic selves with our practices, all of that kind of stuff. So it's been a big journey for me as well. As like, it doesn't matter what, necessarily qualifications you've done all the time. It's actually just how much work you've had to go through yourself and shift. And like I think we said before, you can only help someone as far as you've helped yourself. And what would you say is the most rewarding part of your job so far that you've experienced?
I think, and I'm sure you would agree, we're very lucky to work within a space where we get to see transformation. I think for me, that is one of the most beautiful things, is to be able to be a facilitator for someone's transformation. And it's something that's kept me within this field of wellness for the whole time I've been here. Even when I was working in corporate, even when I was working as a HR within the field of HR, to help someone understand why they do or don't want to be in their career, or how to help them progress as a human being within their chosen career, that's so rewarding. And even now, I would say one of the most rewarding things now is watching that transformation that women go through, from like when they first come and see me and their belief systems are, I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or I'm unlovable, or I will never have the life that I want, or everyone is better than me, or whatever these things are that are innately within them, to see them come out the other side and be like, no, I am worthy, and I am lovable, and I do adore myself, and I do deserve the best. And in fact, I'm taking action towards that. And those transformations for me are incredible. I mean, working at the addiction center here in Bali was one of the most moving things I've ever done, like to see. And that's seeing someone at their absolute worst, seeing someone who's had to admit themselves into rehab because they no longer have control over their lives. In many cases, they've completely lost their jobs, income, their families come together to try and one last attempt at getting them clean and sober. Many of the time their kids are taken away from them. They've got broken relationships. They've stolen money, like whatever it is, there's so much there, so much shame, so much guilt, and so much that you see. And physically as well, they would come with, their teeth, their skin, like, you're completely disheveled version of yourself. And over the 4 to 8 weeks that they would stay with us, who they are when they walk out of that place, you're like, oh my God, like I see you now. And it's the most, like, it's brought me to tears many, many, many times.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And it's something that is close to my heart because my dad has suffered from addiction and drug, alcohol addiction for pretty much most of my childhood. And I haven't really shared that before, but I think you posted something today about, the core wounds of not feeling good enough, and how that stems from, abandonment. And obviously, I think the work that we do is so much deeper than, like you said, just, changing your diet. It's really getting to the root cause of, the mind body connection piece. Like, where is this limiting belief, this core wound, this trauma maybe response coming from? So maybe you could share some, like, kind of maybe an example of, when someone comes into the rehabilitation center or has, an eating disorder, what do you normally uncover that has the root cause of that experience, and how that's, obviously later manifested as this extreme case of addiction or
Absolutely. And I really like that you interlinked addiction with the eating disorder, because just for those people that maybe don't know, the two are very closely interrelated. The way that the trauma that sits beneath both of those things are very similar, and the addiction that someone has to the binge and purge cycle, or to the restriction cycle, or to the binge cycle, can be very similar to the way that an addict would treat drugs or alcohol. So it's a very similar wound that sits beneath those actions, but they just are coming out in different ways. And it's no different for sex addiction, gambling addiction, shopping addiction. Like, at the end of the day, we're all seeking a high, a dopamine release in the reward center of our brain, which is what we become addicted to make us, which keeps us wanting more and more and more and more. So underneath that, I mean, look, the traumas are vast and various, but I think it's a great a great place to start is that there is a trauma. There's a wound
Yeah.
that sits there, and sometimes that wound is, can be something seemingly small that could have happened when a person was relatively young. It could be something quite drastic, such as sexual or physical abuse as a child, or even as a teenager, or even as a young adult or an adult. But it can also be something that is an accumulation of a belief that has progressed over time, such as I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, because a primary caregiver ignored you or was absent or couldn't give you the emotional nurturing that you needed. And what we do is then, if that becomes our narrative and that becomes our first idea of, say, love, let's use that as an example,
Yeah.
then what I might do from there is then that becomes my narrative, that becomes what I believe. And so my brain then seeks out evidence to confirm that belief to be true. So then I start, every time someone does something, it's very objective, but I'll interpret it as fueling that belief. So it becomes, the wound becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. And in fact, I can also subconsciously self-sabotage myself to also prove it to be true. So then I have this narrative that is so real, and the neural pathways in my brain are so strong that it's like, well, no, this is 100% true. There is absolutely no way that it can't be true. And if that is the case, and if I am unlovable and if I am not worthy, then what is the point of me being here? And how do I deal with these emotions that I'm having? So for someone who's never received compassion as a child or emotional nurturing as a child, and doesn't have an ability to regulate their emotions, that's a really overwhelming feeling, right? Like, we don't know, we can't identify what it is that we're feeling, and we don't know how to deal with it. So what do? Like, I'll find something that temporarily soothes or band-aids the pain. That could be self-harm. That could be, I'll start having a glass of wine every night and that feels okay. That could be, I'll, throw up, or I will binge eat because the binging gives me a feeling of happiness for a minute. It gives me that brief release that I desire from the weight that is inside my mind and the weight that I carry on my shoulder, and this innate belief of not good enough and not worthy enough. And it creates this huge disconnect in ourselves, from ourselves to ourselves, as well as ourselves to the world around us. And the more isolated and lonely we become within our journey, the more dark it will become. The deeper the addiction will become, the more severe it will become, the more I'll isolate myself and ostracize myself away. And the harder it will be for me to face the demons of my mind and to address my limiting beliefs, because I become more and more and more certain, especially as I become an addict, more and more certain that, like, why should anyone care about me if I am a worthless human being who now steals and lies and has lost my child? And that's where addiction can take us. So it's such a long and scary path for someone. But it's the same thing with an eating disorder, to end up in that place where we have so much shame and so much guilt. And it's like, how do I even start this process? Because I'm not even worthy of starting this process, because I'm not good enough. And I've just proved it to myself over the past 5 years or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, it's really powerful. You said that. Even just the other day, for just a quick mention, I had a girlfriend of mine, and we were caught in it on the beach on like the camera in Bali. They do the surfing, and I was laughing, and I sent her a picture like, oh, we were caught. I spoke to her in person. I was like, we were caught on the camera, and she was wearing like like a baggy top, and she instantly felt the shame about her body because she didn't feel or look her best self. And it's funny because I really, not funny, but I relate that to myself, because in my life, I think we were talking about it before, I've been so obsessed about what I eat and what I put in my body, to the point where I was gaining weight and I was looking at other women, like, they eat what they want, they do what they want, and also like kind of subconsciously projecting that and shaming other women because I had this
Mm.
belief like, oh, how can they can eat what they want? And also it was coming from that lack within, and I felt like this shame that I was had to be so controlled about what I ate, and actually would put on more weight. But yeah, going back to the friend that I was speaking about, and I just saw how women are just so, we're just so we link everything, our self-worth, to our body and the way that we look, and it's so unfortunate, because I really feel the more greater wholeness we get, and the more tapped into that authenticity, the more beautiful we become. Like, you know, we're not both not wearing any makeup, and we like love it, you know, compared to when we're younger and we like put all the makeup on and we, you know, we hide ourselves because we don't really connect. We don't know our
Oh,
true selves yet.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think women have such a, women and men, I mean, I work more so with women, but men, go through the same thing as well. But it's
Mm.
I think there are so many things which fuel that comparison trap. If we already feel like if we have an underlying narrative that we're not good enough for any way, and then you couple that, unfortunately, with society's expectations, with advertising, with magazines, with social media, with all this information, with school, even, when you're at school, you're told, or we were told, what are you going to be when you grow up? Don't do that. That's wrong. That's not ladylike. Dress like this. Don't do that. Like you're told this stuff, and we absorb all of this information all the time, and we're always then comparing ourselves, because comparison is a survival mechanism that we have had within us for a very long time. It's just that we have so much information now, and so much false information, that is causing us to feel like we're just innately not good enough. And so we need to, like you said, starve ourselves, or we compare, like, my legs to someone who's got legs that are so much longer, and then I strive to have the impossible, and then that becomes this cycle of anxiety, and a cycle of depression, and a cycle of unworthiness, and always feeling like someone has something better than you, rather than embracing all of who you are and finding that authenticity within you and flourishing within it. Because I think that is the most beautiful thing to see, when someone can be like, hey, this is who I am, and this is all of what I am. These are my imperfections, these are the things I'm working on, these are the things I'm proud of myself for, these are my boundaries, this is the way I communicate. Like that is super empowering, and it's amazing. It would be amazing to see more and more people be able to operate in that way. I'm a big believer in what I call the ripple effect, which is like, when someone is able to delve into that, then you only become an inspiration for others. You only become someone who can, help society and the environments in the world in a greater way. And then that then hopefully ripples to someone else, who then is inclined to do the same and the same and the same. And, I think we're very lucky to have the role of being a part of that process, both of us.
I think it's also, for me, it's been about having that safe connection, like you said before. It's like when we feel safe in our adult environment, we can start to, you know, look at a bit more deeply those adaptive survival strategies that once were very powerful and they actually really helped us, but now are just not serving us. Like, I know in my life I've definitely come from a place of like comparison, judgment, because I felt that lack of self-worth and had to compare myself to other women to feel better, to feel make myself feel safe. And it's still a daily practice that, of course, it gets better with time. But you know, when I notice myself comparing or judging and not feeling good enough, you know, if someone's got more degrees, and you know that comes up, and I'm like, you know, and then you have to have that conscious awareness to be like, no, I'm good enough, I am enough, I do enough. And when did
Yeah.
it shift for you? Obviously you work a lot with women doing this, but I feel like, when did you feel that shift for you, when you came more into your authenticity and that kind of really revealed to you your
Um,
powers and gifts?
Yeah, look, I think it's happened over time. I very much feel that my life has gone in chunks, like stages of shifting, if that makes sense. So like I would say I had a significant shift when I was probably about 21, 22. Then I had another significant shift at about 25, a huge shift at about 29. Maybe it was my Saturn return, I don't know, but like my whole life flipped upside down. And it was a very difficult but very eye-opening experience for me. And then, over the past year, in building up my own practice again and things like that, I really started to question, like, who am I, and who do I want to show up as, and what feels right for me. And over these shifts of time, it's meant a restructuring of friends, a restructuring of relationships, an adjusting of careers, a learning how to find my voice, a learning how to build a connection with my father again. Like, different things that have been really, really important for me, but have had to come up when they were ready. you know. And I think that's I think that's a really important thing for anyone that is going through a healing journey, is that it is a journey, and that it's really important to address things as they come up and then settle back into life, you know, just kind of go with what you learn, go with how you're feeling, experience life, apply, experiment, try, and then no doubt something else comes up and you go like, ooh, okay, another layer of the onion is coming off now, let's address this now. So I never think, I don't, to answer your question, I would feel my most authentic now because I've gone through all of that. The biggest shifts for me were probably just before I moved to Bali. I went through a lot of shit in that year or a year and a half. And then in the past year, it's been a real kind of refining or fine tuning of who I am. And yeah, like, you know, working through my own, I still have limiting beliefs, you know, we all do. And it's still like fine tuning that and being like, ooh, this feels funny for me, or this feels vulnerable, or I still think that, you know, this thought's still coming up for me, or whatever it is. And being like, okay, cool. Like, how do I sit with that? And how do I experiment with a behavior that might help me see the opposite?
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's definitely one I've been working on, is like people pleasing, and like you said, oversharing information when people are maybe not ready to hear it. And I think that's like, you know, like the teacher appears and the student's ready. I think a big part of my healing journey is actually not, you know, when we do go on our own healing journey, we think we can save everyone, and it's
Oh
like
yeah.
every time I'm speaking to someone, I'm like analyzing them. Okay, what adaptive survival strategy they have, and then it causes further separation because you're not actually listening. You're kind of trying to
Not there with
them.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Whenever I run retreats, because I run retreats, or I've run many retreats over the years, but whenever I run retreats, it's always very, very intensive, right? And at the end of the retreat, because people always freak out at the end of a retreat. They're like, oh my God, but what do I do now? Like, how do I integrate back into like my life? And I always say to them, like, just integrate back. Like, don't think you need to change or be anything or do anything different. Like, what you learn will come up for you in its own way. Like, it'll just show up for you. You just get on with life and allow life to show you what you need to learn, and then, you know, move with it, rather than a lot of us can get stuck in that, like, oh, I'm doing this, but I need to be like this or be more like this. And that like kind of perfectionism mindset or that comparison can come in even when someone's in therapy. Like, oh, I didn't answer the way I should have, and I should be better at communicating, or I should have had better boundaries and it got crossed again. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm not progressing. You know, that's life. It's fine, you know. We just need to be able to roll with the punches and then continue to prove ourselves worthy of having those experiences.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely something I'm learning, as like having boundaries and knowing when to share information and not actually overshare, and also because I know it's coming from that place of lack. It's not like feeling that embodiment. Like I know, you know, what I teach and do is good enough, and I think it's been such a healing thing for me as well. I'm sure people listening, it's like, especially if you're in this coaching wellness space, which a lot of people are, it's like you have to hear that you've helped someone heal their, you know, heal their life or change their life in some ways to really actually, oh, I am good enough. Like, oh, I did do a good job. Like, oh, you did get your period back. I feel, and I don't know if for you, if you, for me, it feels like every time I hear someone, you know, someone's like, oh, you're doing a good job. I'm like, really? Am I? Oh, thanks. Like the inner girl is like, oh, I feel, just want to feel like that love and appreciation, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think no, you know, you definitely make a good point there. And I think imposter syndrome is very real for many of us. You know, I mean, I struggle to think of another therapist or a nutritionist or even psychologists that I know that don't have it to some degree, you know, because we're also putting ourselves in a very vulnerable position of helping others. And, you know, helping someone else is a huge responsibility. It's a really big task to take on. And to have someone trust you with their vulnerability is a huge privilege. And so, you know, it's natural that we want to try to do our best. And if we have our own wounds, and, you know, same, I have a very similar inner child wound from my father of, you know, I need to prove myself and have someone be proud of me, which fuels a lot of the kind of limiting beliefs that I have. But it is very much being like, no, I know what I'm doing, and I know that I'm capable, and I know that there is a person or a tribe or a community out there for me that is just for me, because there are so many people, and I think we tend to forget that, like, there's enough of everyone for everyone. You know, like it is, there is so much there. And, you
Yeah.
know, we don't, once again, I find personally, and I don't know if you have this as well, but for me, sometimes I can still be very much that kind of comparison can still come up for me a lot through social media, and it's something that I do make a conscious effort of monitoring and of being very conscious of who I follow and how they make me feel. It's a really big part of my career and my the way I operate in business. Like I've noticed in the past that if I follow too many people that bring up things for me, it can really throw me off my work, and it can really make me feel like I'm not good enough and I don't show up authentically because I fall into my ego, as you said before, and I start trying to overprove rather than just delivering what I know that I'm good at delivering. And yeah, I mean, I would just, if anyone doesn't or hasn't done a social media call in a while, I highly recommend it.
Yes. No, do you recommend like, yeah, what is there a simple tool, or is there something that you recommend that can help people cultivate greater self-worth, self-trust, self-confidence, something that's simple that they can start applying, today that's helped you and your clients and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, the most simple things, or one of the easiest things that I like to get people to do is to write. Like for me, the antidote of the inner critic, if we're going to use the inner critic, because the inner critic is what drives a lot of this feeling of self-worth and disconnection and all of these things. The antidote to that is self-compassion. I'm a huge believer in self-compassion, and a big part of the therapy that I practice as well as CBT is compassion focused therapy, and it is helping people to engage with their compassionate voice and to help them engage with their perfect nurturer, and to help them engage with their emotional nurturer, something which many of us didn't have the opportunity to receive or know as children. So I would encourage you to make a list of your limiting beliefs, things that come up for you, things that you tell yourself often, to write them all down and just to take a moment to observe them and to maybe read them out loud and be like, wow, like this is the stuff I say to myself. This is interesting, and just let that sit with you for a minute. Imagine if there was someone sitting opposite you and you were saying this to them, like, you're not good enough, you're so unworthy, you're stupid, you don't know anything, god, you're an idiot, like, you're so fat, you're so unattractive, you need Botox. Like, imagine saying that to someone constantly every single day. Like, it's horrible. It's such a it's bullying. It's really, really horrible, yet we say it to ourselves all the time and we don't realize that. So as a first exercise, just be aware. Like, be aware of what you're saying, be aware of what the inner critic is saying. And then I would ask you, like, is it true?
Yeah.
Is this true? Like, and what is the evidence to support these things? Is there evidence? And if so, what is it? Write it down. And then I would ask you, okay, if I was to ask someone who loved you dearly, your mother, your daughter, your best friend, if they also agree that this is true, what would they say? Would they say, yes, it's true? Or would they say, no, it's not true? And if they were to say it's not true, why would they say that, right? So just consider that. And then I would get you to imagine that your best friend or this person was sitting across from you and saying this stuff to you about themselves. And then I would encourage you to say, okay, how would I respond to someone I love who told me that they weren't good enough, or that they were stupid, or that they, weren't beautiful enough? Like, what would I say to them? And say it out loud, write it down, and then see how it would feel to turn that around back on yourself. And just as an experiment, go through that exercise and see what comes up for you. See where the difficulties lie, see what evidence comes up, all of these things, and explore it, But I highly recommend working with someone that feels good and right for you in order to really get to the bottom of this stuff. I do have a free self-compassion workshop on my website somewhere, or I can maybe send you the link. It's just like a 1-hour webinar on it that people can do just to see what self-compassion is all about.
I'm gonna do it. I need it.
Yeah, do it. It's a pre-recorded webinar that I did, but it's a great introduction to the topic. And I think it's something that everybody needs. I think everyone needs to. There's a difference between being compassionate to others versus being compassionate to yourself. And I think everybody can benefit from being more compassionate to themselves.
Fully, yeah. And then I heard a quote like, Just imagine everyone's just trying their best, because they really are. And I think I got it from Brene Brown, and it's like this
Yeah.
thing, like when we think of everyone just trying their best, which really we all are, like we can only do as much as we are aware of. And I think when you come from that space, then you realize, like, everyone's doing their best, and you have more compassion for others, but therefore for yourself. And I think we can only,
Yeah.
that's something I've definitely had to work on. I definitely didn't have that
Yeah.
much compassion for myself and others. So it's a daily practice too.
Yeah, and it's honoring your humanness, isn't it? Like, we're not perfect beings. It's There's no such thing, and it's like we're human, and that is the most beautiful thing in the world because we're so unique. And I just think that that needs to be honored more than a wanting everyone to look the same and be the same. Like, how boring.
Exactly. And I think the more that we can bring the shadow parts of our personality to light, the more that we can integrate them. Like, it's been a big healing for me, is like using the gifts, or using the things that I would deem the negative parts of my personality, but using it to amplify the my gifts. And, like, for example, like, just quick before we leave, is like noticing like people's kind of blind spots or weak spots. That's been an adaptive survival strategy for me, and it's not a very nice one, but it would keep me safe in moments that I felt unsafe. And now seeing it, how I can shift that and make them feel safe, to then help them uncover that own blind spot themselves, instead of telling them I know what's wrong with you, kind of coming from that more compassionate space and helping them see it themselves. But when we have the ego, sometimes we maybe don't do it in the most nicest of ways. So it's definitely been,
Right.
definitely. But I would love to, because I
Yeah.
know you have to shoot off soon. I would love to
Yeah.
promote some of your work. You have some incredible stuff. You have a podcast. You have an online platform. Please share a little bit about that. So,
Oh yes, so I do. We have so there's a couple of different things that people can do to connect. I mean, I do one-on-one therapy, which is done via Zoom with women all around the world. There is a wait list for that at the moment, so I am booked at the moment. But I mean, things do change, and it's not my aim to keep people in therapy, for the rest of their lives. I do like to work with my clients so that eventually they go from seeing me weekly to monthly to every 3 months to, maybe every 6 months. So that is something that changes all the time. So if someone is interested in one-on-one therapy, that is available. But something that I would recommend people to do if they wanted to work with me more is that I do have a signature online program, which is called the Coming Home program. And it is a 12-week intensive self-development program. So it's got like 63 video lessons and over 95 downloadable, editable worksheets. It takes you through, it follows the chakra system. So it actually takes you all the way from the root chakra through to the crown, and it identifies all of, or provides you with therapeutic videos, tools, and techniques in order to help you identify everything from your values and belief systems all the way up to your intuition and your spiritual self. So it takes you on a real journey, and it includes meditations, yoga sequences, and all sorts of things as well as some guest speakers who talk about your money mindset, your sex mindset, and things like that as well. So it's a fantastic starting point for people, and it's really in depth. It takes a lot of commitment and willingness, and I think that it is a place where at the end you end up with like basically a booklet of who you are right now and what you need to work on. Like, it's quite phenomenal. And then if you want to go and see a therapist or a psychologist, or you want to delve into anything deeper, you kind of have this blueprint that okay, this is who I am, and this is what I'm struggling with, and this is where I need to go. And it's a fantastic way for people to move through that. So that starts again on the 28th of May. The wait list is open, but the doors for sales don't open until next week. So that is something that will be starting soon again. Yeah.
I love
And
the
yes, and also I have a podcast, sorry. So there's Nothing Hidden. It's called Nothing Hidden, and it's a podcast I do with one of my best friends who I grew up with here in Bali. She is a clinical psychologist and a sex therapist. And we have a podcast which we talk about all sorts of things, everything from love addiction and masturbation through to disordered eating, body image, like everything. So it's a great listen. We're about to start season 2. So yeah, definitely check that out if you want to as well.
I will. And you said you send me an episode so I can tune in this
I'll
weekend.
send you an episode. Yeah.
Great. And yeah, and I love that. That sounds that program sounds insane. Like using the chakra systems is so powerful. And yeah, I want to do it.
Yeah.
Like it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, for anyone listening, I'll put all of your details at the bottom. Connect with Nikki at, I think, State of Soul. Is that your Instagram? I'll put on the link.
Yeah, so it's state of soul with a little underscore at the end. So I think it's state, I don't even know, state.of.soul underscore. And the website is just stateofsoul.co.
Beautiful. Yeah, maybe when everyone can come back to Bali, we'll have to do a women's retreat together or do
Oh,
something.
we will. I would love
Yeah,
that.
I'd love to do
Yes,
that.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for your
Absolutely. Thank
time and
you
your
so much.
energy.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki. And we'll see you guys next week on the Dharma journey. Bye.